I'm Rebecca Armstrong. I am the training manager with HR2day, and I also do HR myself as well. So I actually train HR and leadership development are my two areas of specialism. And within HR, my area of specialism is the Equality Act. And it's one of the most important acts that you need to be aware of, because it's typically one of the places where employers will get themselves into trouble without actually realising or meaning to get into trouble. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. So, previous to 2010, there was a number of acts in the UK, and they were all brought in at different points in time. So, 1954 Sex Discrimination Act came in, right the way through to 2010 when age discrimination came in. And there was lots and lots of different variations within those acts. So it became very complicated for employers to manage within them, because you were building on and pulling out lots of different legislation which were slightly different because they were wrote at different points in time. And some of them were a little bit out of date. So the world had moved on in terms of, you know, society, and some of these employment acts hadn't actually moved with society. So the Equality Act 2010 sought to bring all of those acts together, and ultimately the Equality Act seeks to prevent discrimination on the grounds of 9 protected characteristics. So bullying and harassment does fit into this, but bullying can be wider. Somebody can be bullied about how they look. Somebody can be bullied about the fact they wear glasses. You know, those sorts of things. It's not a protected characteristic, but that would be covered under your bullying policies. That would be covered under those sides. The 9 protected characteristics are the biggest risk to you as an employer. Last year, the average payout at tribunal for breach of one of these protected characteristics was £22,000. The highest payout in the last 3 years against these characteristics was £390,000. So let me ask you a question. If I came to you today and said, write me a cheque for £22,000, no questions asked, could your company, I'm not asking you to answer this, I'm asking you to think of the answer, could your company write that out without causing itself severe difficulty or having to go to the bank and get money? And then ask yourself, your worst case scenario, if you're a bigger employer and your breach is bigger, could you survive a cheque of £390,000? A lot of people, that from a cash flow perspective, that would be the end. So it's a massive risk. So I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just trying to tell you the facts. What we need to do, or what you need to do, is to make sure that you protect yourselves in terms of these characteristics. Now, as I said before, the Equality Act applies to employees and non-employees. It applies to anybody who really has an interaction with your organisation that may lead to or may be construed as some sort of employment in itself. So if I come for an interview with your organisation, you decide not to give me the job because I'm female, and I can prove that, and I have reason to believe that was the case, and you can't prove that it wasn't the case, which is where your recruitment comes in and why your recruitment needs to be really robust, not just a conversation down McDonald's on, you know, a Friday afternoon. And Joe's here from Joe Hand Recruitment, who can certainly help you with that if you want any support on that. If your recruitment doesn't back you up, they'll win. They'll win in court. And most employers don't make recruitment notes. They don't keep those notes. So if you had to go to court and say, actually, I picked this person because they met the criteria that I was looking for, and here's my scoring mechanism, and here's my matrix, and here's the notes of the interviews that happened, and here's the outcome. If you haven't got that, regardless of whether you discriminated or not, a judge would potentially see that as discriminatory. So you put yourself at risk. The other thing with these characteristics is they can be taken by association. So just by being associated to somebody who has a characteristic, you can take a case of being offended. So for example, if 2 people were talking about something that was linked to a protected characteristic, okay, so they're talking about age, okay, and the 2 people involved in the conversation are not offended in the least bit. You know, it's a bit of banter, yes, okay, it's probably not sort of right, but it's a bit of banter, it's okay. And I over here, and I take offence at that, I can take that case to tribunal even though I wasn't involved in the conversation and the conversation wasn't directed to me. Okay, as an employee, I'll take you to grievance and then tribunal under these protected characteristics because you've allowed those conversations to happen. Okay, so the first one is sex. Sex specifically relates to gender. male to female. So the Act says that you cannot be treated differently, unfairly, on the basis of being male or female. That includes things like pay, it includes promotion, it includes the person's ability to get the job in the first place. The Act says that regardless of your sex, you are able to do the job. Even in some of the cases where that has been, so the armed forces were one place that particularly did segregate, or say that, you know, there couldn't be female submariners. Those sorts of things are starting to change. I think the Marines still don't accept females into there, but they are reviewing that. Now, a female officer would still have to be able to meet the standards of the Royal Marines, but if they meet them, then why shouldn't they be considered for it? The only sort of exception to that, and this is true of all of the Acts, you can positively discriminate if you have very, very, very good reason to do so. So an example of this could be within the health service. If you're running an NHS trust, you're looking for a nurse. That nurse could be male or female, but if you're specifically looking for a nurse to deal with female rape victims immediately after they've been raped, in terms of, you know, not diagnosis, but you know, observation and things like that, assessment, then you could legitimately say, in that context, I want a female nurse. But you would have to be able to justify it. And very, very, very few companies, so I'm going to emphasise that, very few companies would ever be in a position where they could legitimately discriminate on sex. Another one where it does happen quite a lot is in the TV world. You know, obviously if I'm the producers for EastEnders and I decide I'm going to bring in another Mitchell brother, and a 16-year-old girl comes along, it's not going to work. So I can legitimately say, actually, I need a male and I need them to be within this sort of age range to make it work. Okay, age. So age is a protected characteristic. It includes people from a young perspective as well as from an older perspective. It means that you can't discriminate on the grounds of age. We do make things up, so we make things up that young people aren't as reliable as older people. Older people might have more sickness because they're getting old. So we make up all of this stuff that isn't actually true. So we can't discriminate on those bases. The only place you can is in the licence and trade, where you can discriminate the under 18 for serving alcohol, because licence and law would determine that. But you couldn't decide, oh right, okay, I want somebody who to be a receptionist. I'd like somebody who's a little bit older because I think they're going to be more reliable. You can't actually do that. You need to open it up, see what candidates come forward, pick the best candidate for the job based on the assessment criteria that you lay out. Race. So race discrimination, quite a big one. Quite a lot of cases of racial discrimination that we come across, to be honest. This says that somebody can't be treated differently, unfairly on the grounds of their race. This is not just about colour of skin. So we've had cases where people have taken grievances, didn't get a tribunal, but we've had complaints which would be upheld in race, where somebody was Scottish and was treated differently because of the fact that they were Scottish. So it's all races. It's not just your traditional, you know, about colour of skin, which tends to be the ones that hit the paper. It's really important that you get these ones right. You know, the ones that are going to hit the big money if they go to tribunal are the ones that are very, you know, very sensitive in the news at the time. They are the things like disability. They are the things like race. They tend to be the ones that are going to escalate quite quickly. So, and we've got a case where we had a company who had they didn't have a HR. They'd done an investigation into this. They deemed that racial discrimination hadn't happened. That had gone to appeal. When we've gone in and done the investigation properly, it actually has happened, but there's also bullying involved. So we're now in a position with them where we're not only, you know, they've kind of done a lot of damage by doing it on their own, and because it's race, they've left themselves open. To be honest, if this person does go forward into a into a legal case, they have got a pretty strong case. So what we need to do is to mitigate that as much as we can by doing a thorough appeal investigation, changing any decisions that have been made to make the right decisions, dealing with it fairly, and we will mitigate it as much as we can, and we don't think it'll end up escalating into tribunal because we've went back and repaired it. Had they not brought us in for the appeal, it probably would have wiped, it would have wiped the floor with them. Religion or similar belief. So religion is what is defined by the census. So that means things like Jedi are a UK religion. Okay, and that's because in the census enough people tick the box to say that they're a Jedi. Now it's really easy to have a laugh about it. We all kind of go, really? But the point is that if that's somebody's belief, who are we to say that that's right or wrong? That's their belief, and that's therefore right for them. We don't have to agree with it, but we respect that that's right for them. And that's true of all religions. So we can't discriminate somebody on the grounds of their religion. There was a landmark case on this, I think it was about 2 years ago now, which was by British Airways. You probably saw this in the press. And this is a demonstration of how law is only as up to date as what the judge says on the day. So British Airways had a policy that said, I don't know whether you've ever seen the programme about British Airways or had anything to do with British Airways, but they're very, very much about their uniform. Everything's perfect, everything's where it needs to be, everything's tied in the right way. It's very, very strict. And part of their policy is that you can't wear necklaces. So I couldn't wear this working for British Airways. So there's a lady who had a necklace on which was a cross. So British Airways said, we're not just, why should we let you wear it and nobody else wear the necklace? We're making a decision which says you can't wear jewellery. So it's not about it being a cross, you can't wear jewellery. And they upheld their policy. Now at that time, if you looked at case law, that was not the wrong thing to do. That was, it wasn't about religion, it wasn't stopping them believing or anything like that. What they were saying is, you can't wear jewellery. It went to court. This lady took them to court. She took them to tribunal. It got a lot of press coverage. The judge ruled in a landmark case that she had been discriminated on the grounds of religion by not being able to wear a religious symbol. Okay, she won, I can't remember the exact amount, but she won something like £100,000. She won a lot of money as a result of it. Now, the only caveat to that would be if health and safety was involved. So obviously if I'm wearing a religious symbol but then I'm going to work at a production plant and leaning over a machine like this, absolutely yes, you could say from a health and safety point of view you don't wear jewellery. But in most cases you can't stop that because it's somebody's right to express their religious beliefs. So that's that one. No, okay. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is similar belief. So similar belief sort of expands that out a little bit, and again this is where it starts to become a little bit of a grey area. But what similar belief says is we all have the right to believe what we believe, whether that be in politics, whether that be in religion, whether that be about things that are happening. Okay, we all have our own right to believe what we believe. That doesn't mean to say that the other person's wrong if they believe something different. So everyone gets to believe what they believe and not get treated differently as a result of it. So arguably, if I said, right, I'm really pro-Europe, I think we should have the euro, I think we should go all in, and you believe opposite, if I'm treated differently, then it's more of a grey area. But actually, I could argue that I've been treated differently and unfairly or dismissed or not given a job because of a belief that I have that doesn't actually affect my ability to do the job. Disability. So we've covered this one a little bit. So disability defined as anything that's likely to last for more than 12 months, that has it can be mental or physical, and it has an impact on the person's ability to live their life day to day, or likely to have an impact on the person's ability to live their life day to day. Some disabilities are very physical, very apparent. Physical disability, you're going to know about it, you make reasonable adjustments for it. A lot of disabilities are hidden. If you look at disability statistics, 16% of the UK population of the working age has a life-limiting disability. So 1 in 5 people who come for a job are likely to have disability, and that is rising. That is continually rising. So as employers, you can't get away from it. It's about how do we embrace it and how do we work with it and create environments where we get the right candidate regardless of a circumstance. Okay, so there's a massive gap. If you look at the people who are in employment, 47% of people who have a disability are in employment, as opposed to 76% of people who don't have a disability are in employment. So there is a 30 percentage point gap between the two. Now, yes, sometimes, you know, it might be that the disability prevents somebody from working, but the reality is that gap is seen as being too big, and that indicates that somewhere in the UK there is discrimination at play around disability. You absolutely only have to make reasonable adjustments, and it is what is reasonable. They don't have to declare it. Our encouragement to you is to talk about it. That's the first step. If somebody comes to you and tells you something, and very rarely will they come and say, I've got a disability. They'll come and say, oh God, you know, they might be talking, oh, I went to the doctors yesterday, I got diagnosed with this, I'm a bit, you know, whatever it is. At that point, that's your trigger to sit down with them and say, I really want to support you. What is it that I need to be aware of? What is it that we need to do? How do we adjust to enable you to continue to do your job? Sexual orientation, so someone can't be discriminated on the grounds of their sexual orientation, whether that be that they are heterosexual, homosexual or bisexual, so it covers all of those three. And it can also be by perception. All of these can be by perception, but this is where perception appears the most. If somebody isn't gay, but people have a joke that they might be, which happens a lot, then they, even though they are not, they can take a case against this protected characteristic on the grounds of being treated differently because they are perceived as having a protected characteristic. Marriage and civil partnership, so this was extended to include civil partnership. So somebody can't be discriminated on the grounds that they are or might be married. This typically starts to link to the next one, which is pregnancy. So people start making up, oh, female, oh, 20s, oh, engagement ring. Yeah, they'll probably be getting married in a few years, and then the babies will come, and then I'll have to pay maternity pay, won't I? So people start to make these assumptions, and then discrimination starts to happen. So you need to let go of all of that and see the person and decide whether the person's right. Maternity and pregnancy, like I've said, that does actually cover paternity as well. Even though it doesn't indicate it, it does under the legislation include the father's right. It also includes the adoption side of things as well. So adoption law is very similar to maternity law. It's very reflective in terms of the time off and things like that. It's slightly different in terms of the amount of time you can take off for parental leave. It's slightly more with adoption because there's an assumption it's going to take longer for an adopted child to settle in. But it does cover both parents. It covers same-sex couples having children as well. And then the last one is gender reassignment. So somebody who changes their gender, whether that be through full reassignment or whether that be on the pathway to doing so, which may include cross-dressing and things like that, they can't be treated differently as a result of it. Now, the typical question I get asked from this is, which toilets do they use? And the key to that is there's a point in time where legally somebody changes sex. So regardless of how they dress, there's a point in time where you are legally considered to be the opposite sex. And you ultimately, from that perspective, deal with the person based on their legal sex. I'm guessing none of you want robots. You want people. You want people who are going to come and do a good job for you, care about your organisation, are going to work hard, are going to stay with you. That's what you want. And those people come with these characteristics. We all have some all or one or two, or some of these characteristics apply to everyone. So you want to see the person, not the characteristic, is what we're saying. And that comes from conversations. So, you know, if somebody has disability, talk to them about it. If somebody's going through gender reassignment, talk to them about it. Be confidential, be discreet, be respectful. Don't do it from a place of judgment. It doesn't matter whether you agree with it or disagree with it. It doesn't matter. It's not your, you know, it's not your decision to have. But what you want to do is to make sure that that person can continue to be a valued member of your team, and to do that you treat them as the person. I call it the humanisation of organisations. We can either put bums on seats or we can put people in seats, and if we put people in seats you will grow because the organisation becomes human, and that's what you want.